Hi, and welcome back to my channel. This video is my reading wrap-up for the month of July. Now, I have already read 9 books this month of August, but we're just going to go up to July 31st. And as of July 31st, I read a total of 317 books of my Goodreads goal, which is 450. Now, for July, we're just going to talk about July. I was able to read 45 books, but I want to share some interesting stats with you in this month of July. Now, for July, I did start off by reading maybe until the 4th or the 5th, I read 5 or 6 books. And then I started to take some time away and watched a lot of television. And the reason I did that is during the month of June, I binge read all 24 Nicholas Sparks books and 11 of the books that were adapted to movies. This kind of gave me a book hangover, and I needed to regroup. I needed to regroup for reading, for reviewing, for this YouTube channel, and just overall. So there's some huge gaps. Now, the way that my spreadsheet looks is I put the date I started a book and the date I finished a book. So I read one book on the 1st, another one on the 2nd, on the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th. Then I skipped a day, didn't read again until the 7th. I read good for the 7th, 8th, and 9th, but then I started to skip days after that. And I thought that at that point, around the 12th or the 13th of the month, that I was just going to take it easy in July. But I decided to binge read James Patterson's private series, which I think was 14 books plus one novella. So once I started listening to those as audiobooks, I was able to get right back on the horse and read some more. So let's go over the stats for what I did for each month. For January, I was able to read 48 books, which was over 15,000 pages. For February, 35 books, almost 12,000 pages, just rounding off these numbers. For April, 43 books, over 14,000 pages. In May, 51 books, 17,000 pages. For June, I was able to read 44 books and over 15,000 pages. Now, July, the month that we're talking about in this video. What was interesting in July was, if you follow me on a couple of review groups, you'll find out that I decided to take July off and to just take it easy after the first week. But it didn't happen that way. As I mentioned, I binge read James Patterson, and by doing that, I was able to get 45 books read in July. And that 45, 2/3 of that number came after the second week of July. And that brought me to 15,867 pages. So if we were to add that all up, it comes up to 317 books, not counting my August books. I did not put them on the spreadsheet so that my stats would be accurate for the making of this video. That 317 books came up to 106,465 pages read this year. This averages me to about 500, give or take, pages a day, the average as far as what I read. Now, regarding book length, the average is about 336 pages per book. Some books are longer, some books are shorter. In fact, even on this spreadsheet that I have right here, it tells me the stats for those. For example, for this year, 68 of the books I read were 200 to 299 pages, whereas 204 of the books that I read were 300 to 399 pages. 41 of the books I read were between 400 and 499 pages, and 2 books were over 500 pages. So that when you look at those numbers, it all rounds out to about 335 or so pages a book. And like I said, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. So those are all stats, and I don't think I'm going to go much further with stats. I think I'd like to start talking to you about the books that I read. So I do have some things in front of me because I need a crutch or 2 or 3. So I have my spreadsheet, which I think I should grab a pen. So I make sure to mark things off as I read, as I talk about them. I have one tablet that has the book covers because I'm going to be bringing book covers into this video. And I have another tablet that helps me to remind myself of some of the summaries. Now, once I start talking about books, they start coming to me. And when you think of reading 15,000 pages, you're like, where does your brain file all that information? But believe it or not, once you hear me start talking, you'll see that I remember quite a bit of it, not all of it. But the good thing is I'm reading again. And in reading again, I did set a reading goal for July for, I think I said 60 books, which is an average of 2 books a day. But for August, but there's 31 days in August, so that's technically 62 books. I can't even add. I'm very tired. 62 books. So, but my goal is 60, so we'll see how that goes. So, the first book I read was The Wedding Night, and that was by Claire Boyd. And The Wedding Night was a psychological thriller. It's a Bookature book. Hopefully I can tell you what publishers these books come from, but I did not print that part of the spreadsheet, and I don't want to fiddle through the digital spreadsheet for this. I just want to tell you a little bit about each book. So the first book was The Wedding Night. Like I said, a psychological thriller, and it was about Amy, who had a second chance to marry a man named William, and Amy and her daughter Tess had moved into William's home, and he has a son named Hal. Now, even though Amy is excited about her future with William, she starts to realize that he has secrets. And even Hal, his son, has secrets. So Hal and Amy's daughter Tess are struggling in their sibling relationship. Now, the thing is, Amy's daughter Tess goes missing. So her attention is not on getting married now, it's trying to find her daughter. And then she has to ask if her daughter's disappearance has to do with William's secret past. That is The Wedding Night. Now, the title, when I read the title, I thought I was going to read a book about a couple that were literally about to have their wedding night, or have their wedding had passed and the events that led up to the wedding. And that's what this book did. But the interruption in that was the fact that her daughter went missing. That was The Wedding Night, and I believe I gave that 4 stars. I wish I had written the ratings down, but I didn't. The next book I read was The Housekeepers. It was another psychological thriller. This was by Alex Hay, and I think this was a Berkeley book, but I'm not even gonna try to guess on that one too much. There was a ball, and a group of women decided to plan a revenge heist against society. It's a historical novel, and it focuses on power, gender, and class. Now, you have someone, her name is Mrs. King. She's a housekeeper, right? But she's no ordinary housekeeper. She was born into a family of con artists and thieves, and so she decided to step outside of that mode, made herself respectable, and she's running this grand home in a town called Mayfair. Well, the thing is, the Mayfair is exclusive, and there are treasures there, wealth and power and more, but there's also secrets. So Mrs. King, through a series of events, gets dismissed from her position, and as she does, she decides this is going to be an act of revenge. So she gathers together a group of people, they create a plan, and there's a costume ball that's about to take place, and as it takes place, they are going to rob everybody blind. That is The Housekeepers. My next book is part of a series. Now, I will always try to tell you what series these books are part of and also where they lie in the series. This is Two Little Souls by B.R. Spangler. Now, this is the Detective Casey White, number 9. I have read all the previous books in the series. Now, in this case, we have two children who were saved after being on a small raft. And it became clear, sadly, that they lost their parents during the event that put the children on the raft. Now, it wasn't just a case, say, of drowning. It was a case of murder. And what's more is Detective Casey Wright is pretty sure that these young children, and I think they were 4 and 6 or 4 and 8, they were young. She knew that they had witnessed their parents' murders. Oh, they were ages 3 and 6. I do have it written down here. And she wants to discover who killed their parents. And while they're looking for this killer, Casey's life is changing. And here's the thing. Casey, years ago, her daughter disappeared. Well, she's now with her partner, Jericho, and someone had come to work with the police, with Casey, and barring a spoiler, in case you want to start the series at the beginning, Casey had a connection that had to do with that missing daughter. This means that Casey is thinking about moving away from the Outer Banks. This is in North Carolina. And I think they are thinking about moving to D.C. And so while the case has to do with finding the killers of those children's parents, Casey's personal life is going in different directions. And there's even something about Jericho, her partner Jericho, that makes Casey very uncertain about where her future is going to lie. Excellent, excellent book. I'm pretty sure I went 5 stars with that one. Then I read The Bigamist by Rona Halsell. Now, The Bigamist is a psychological thriller where Emma joins a bereavement group and she meets a man named Sam. It's both of their first times at this bereavement group, and they take off and they hit it off. Okay, that's how they met. So what happens is they fall in love, they get married, and she becomes pregnant, but it's not cut and dry like that. Now, who is Sam, this man that Emma falls in love with? Well, he's an architect, a very busy architect. In fact, he's always gone on the weekends on all these various jobs. But notice the name of the book. The book is called The Bigamist. So, one day, Emma's flipping through a magazine, and as she's flipping through this magazine, what does she do? She sees a painting that came from her personal belongings. And this painting is in the home of someone that's connected to Sam. That's all I'll tell you. That's all I'll tell you. I could tell you more, but it was a solid read. Okay? It looks like I have to fix a typo. I said in my review, it's not a solid read. It was a solid read. Oh, I've got to fix that. Then we have The Girl's Last Cry. Now, this is part of a series. It's a new series. It's the sophomore book in the Detective Lexi Bennett series. And in this particular one, Lexi Blake, oh my goodness, I have typos. Okay, I'll fix that. In this book, Lexi is investigating the death of a young girl, and it appears that the young girl took her own life. Did she or did she not? And then the reader, we know the sinister act that's going on through the way the narration is, okay? But it's up to Lexi to sort out what's going on. Now, when you start the series, and I do recommend you start it with the first book, The Girls on Chalk Hill, you'll find out that Lexi has a disturbing past. And it's her disturbing past that makes her the detective that she is. And The Girls on Chalk Hill came fresh in my mind when I'm reading this book, The Girl's Last Cry. Excellent, excellent book, and I'm glad that I read it. Okay, number 6. The 6th book in the Emma Talon series called Her Enemy. Now, this book is the Drew crime family, number 6, as I said. And that's the crux of the matter is the family's, it's a mob family. So they have mob actions. Well, in this particular book, Scarlett has been dealing with the fact that her aunt is really unhappy that her daughter Ruby had been killed. Okay? Now, Ruby was Scarlett's cousin. Her aunt is Lily. And Ruby had always been a thorn in Scarlett's side. Now, Ruby has a set of twin brothers. They get along with Scarlett just fine, but Ruby and Scarlett never got along. Well, now it's been about a year since Ruby was killed, but it's kind of like circling around the drain. What does this have to do with Scarlett? How does Lily feel about Scarlett right now? And what is going on with Scarlett's cousins, particularly one of them? That's all I'm going to say about that one. Excellent, excellent book. Then I read a historical fiction called The Soldier's Child by Tetyana Denford. Now, this was about when war was underway in the country of Ukraine. It was a case where the book segues from the present to several decades in the past. And when this happens, we read about Katya's tragic experiences. And then by the way the book is written, it's a book of courage, a book of strength, a book of determination. And the thing that just got me really when I was reading this book is it was based on the true story of the author's family. So remember, Katya is our central character. And the book goes back several decades and then it comes back into present day. Well, like I said, the sensitive story that I read had a very strong impact on me because it was based on the true story of the author's family. It's always good to read the author's note and or the acknowledgments at the end of the book because sometimes there's tidbits there that really make everything come full circle when you're reading a book. The 8th book I read was The Lifeboat Sisters, and then we'll talk about the 9th book as well. And the second one was Second Chances for the Lifeboat Sisters. So these were 2 books that I had for a blog tour from Bookouture. And what I did was a series review on my blog. And in this particular book, we have 3 sisters. So we have a trilogy. And we have Ava, Clara, and Gabby. Okay? Now, this book here, the first one, the Lifeboat Sisters, that highlights Ava. And when Ava decides that she wants to become a lifeboat volunteer, it creates a lot of stress in the family. What is the history of it? Why is it called the Lifeboat Sisters? Well, their father, Jack, and his father before him and any male relatives in that family were lifeboat volunteers. A history, a long history. Well, Jack only had daughters, like I said, Ava, Clara, and Gabby. Well, Jack is dead, tragic death. It's been 6 months, and Ava has a bomb to drop on her family. I want to become a lifeboat volunteer. Forget the fact that I'm a woman. So that is Ava's story, and there's some romance in there, and I love that. Now, the second sister has her story in Second Chances for the Lifeboat Sisters, and that is Clara. Now, Clara is not even a week away from her wedding, right? She's ready to get married, but things are just not quite right with her fiance, Logan. Well, Logan, he comes into an inheritance, and he wants to move back. He wants to move to London. And that means that Clara, who lives in Port Promise with her family, with a family of lifeboat volunteers, has a difficult decision. Is she going to follow Logan, or is she going to stay in Port Promise? That was a beautiful, beautiful book. I loved it, and I really can't wait to read the third book in the series. Now, for Women of the Post, okay, that book was by Jershonda Sanders. Now, I put down 2 quotes. And the 2 quotes I put down are, clearly they would not defy the God of their bigotry, even abroad. Another one is, allowed, but maybe not welcome. What was this about? This was about women needed during World War II. And a team of Black women, the 688 Battalion, coming from different backgrounds, including the Bronx slave market, which is something I had never heard of. And by the way, the Bronx slave market was a place where, and we're talking 1939, 1940, where they would hire Black people for domestic work and pay them a pittance, like 5 cents or 15 cents, just a pittance. So it was called the Bronx slave market. Well, the women in this story were Judy Washington, Charity Adams, Mary Alice, and a couple of other ones, and they became part of this 688 battalion. So you have the 6888, and they called it the 6888. Now, this was the Women's Army Corps. They were going from making 50 cents for 8 hours of work to maybe $50 a month, and that was a lot of money in those days. And then we have the drama of each of the women. Like, for example, one of the women who joined the Women's Army Corps got lumped in with the Black women, but she was white. Well, she didn't know that on her birth certificate that her mother had never let her see prior to that is the father was Negro. So now she had a complete turnabout of her life. All of her privilege was gone. That's just one case of the drama in this book. There's other situations where their stories all come together. And there's even like a relationship that couldn't really gain traction at that time, and just a lot of drama. Really, really good book. Now, this book I had here was The Honeymoon Crashers by Christina Lawrence, this next book. This was just a quick audio book, I think 3.5 hours. So on 2-speed was an hour and a half. And this followed The Honeymooners by Christina Lauren. I'm pretty sure the first one was The Honeymooners. And basically it was just a love story of 2 people who were supposed to stand up in the wedding and what brought them together as a couple. Quick read. I would give it 4 stars, 3 or 4 stars. A good read, not the greatest, but a good read. Then I went on to read Her Dying Kiss by Jennifer Chase. Her Dying Kiss was the 10th book in the Detective Katie Scott series. Now, I had to put this quote down. She wondered how much heartache a person could take. What is that heartache that she wondered how much she could take? Well, our character, Katie Scott, has been missing her fiance, Chad, for over a month. They were away on a little rendezvous or, getaway. And she woke up one morning. This is at the end of book number, let's see, which book? Book number 9. She wakes up and Chad is gone. So book 10 comes in a month later and she's still reeling from his disappearance. The thing is, she hadn't even gone back to work, but there's a case and she's needed. And so she has to put her emotions aside and her concern and her investigation about Chad's disappearance and focus on this case. The ending was open because we need to know what happened to Chad. Then I read another book, which is a part of yet another series. And this is the detective or the Nikki Green series number 7. I corrected myself because she's a special agent of the FBI. Now, we have 2 little girls missing. Their names are Thea and Abby. They are 9 years old and 6 years old. Let me put this correctly. Abby is 6, Thea is 9. And Nikki is desperate to get these girls safely back to their mother. One of the girls has diabetes, type 1 diabetes, and she has to have regular insulin injections, so it is truly a race against time. So, when you read this book, you find out that there's a cult in place, and this cult has something to do with the girl's disappearance. Excellent read, and I can't say enough good stuff about Stacy Green because her books are always good. Alrighty, let's move on. Let's move on to Mystery in the Highlands. This is a cozy mystery. And what's good about this one is, what number in the series is it? It's number 3, the Scottish Ladies Detective Agency. So we have Maud McIntyre and Daisy, who used to be her maid, and they have created a detective agency, and this is their newest case. And I love it because it always gives a nod to Sherlock Holmes. We have them trying to gain and garner the respect of others because this is at a time at the 1800s, almost like a Regency time when women did not take on professional jobs. So they were trying to solve this case in this latest book. I loved it. Then we're moving on to Little Lost Angels by Holly S. Roberts. And this is the second book in the Detective Eve Bennett series. Now, this is the case of a missing baby, but it's more than that. Now, in this particular book, we have the history of Eve that went back, and I didn't write down, oh yeah, I did. The first book was called Only Girl Alive, okay? We learned in Only Girl Alive what happened to Eve in her past. That's recounted for us clearly so that if you don't read these back to back or in succession, you won't get lost at all. But now, when Eve has to investigate this case, she's part of a task force. This task force is investigating this fundamentalist sect, okay? And as they're investigating it, that's where the connection to that missing baby is. But there's more, much, much more. And in fact, you have pure evil, especially in the form of Eve's stepbrother, Aaron. And like in this cult, this sect, this fundamentalist group, your women's job was to marry and bear children. So the husband could have 5 wives and 40 children. It was pretty intense. Then I had 2 books by Carrie Fisher. They were The Rome Apartment and Secrets of the Rome Apartment. Now, I'll tell you about both of these books, and I'll try to put both of these covers up at the same time. We have the apartment owner. She's a septuagenarian, and her name is Ronnie or Veronica, but she's called Ronnie. And she has an extra apartment in her building. And she comes up with a plan. She will rent this apartment for a duration of up to 3 months to women of a certain age, and she's going to give them tasks. So once her and her friend peruse the list of applicants and they decide on who their next guest will be, then once their guest arrives, they set them out with certain tasks. That's all I'm going to tell you, because both books have the same type of a theme, obviously different characters. But I do want to say something about the second book, The Secrets of the Rome Apartment. We learn a lot more about Ronnie in the second book than we did in the first book. That's all I'll tell you on that one. Then I read The Survivor by Iris Johansen. That was my least favorite book of the month. I would only go 3 stars. This is an Eve Duncan book. I think 21, 20, somewhere in the dozens. I mean, the Eve Duncan series is getting more and more fantastical as time goes on. And I have decided I will not be continuing in this series. Now, I will probably read the Iris Johansen books that she writes with her son, Roy. But as far as the Eve Duncan series, I think I've hit a wall. Then the next book was The Prenup by Ariane Richmond. Now, in the prenup, Ava married Lucas and she signed a prenup. No worries. She was madly in love. They're going to be together forever. There you have it. Not so. In fact, this book made me, as I got to the last page, I turned my TV on. First, I went to imdb.com, found out who was playing Gaslight, starring Charles Boyer and Ingrid Bergman. Why? Because a prenup, the husband, was a gaslighter, a manipulative, deceitful gaslighter. So Ava, and his name was Lucas, had married him, and she's stuck in this marriage due to this prenup, or she'll have nothing, and he's gaslighting her. I could say a lot more. I got to start doing individual videos again. That's what I need to start doing. Now, I'm going to speed things up. And I am going to run a slideshow, because I binge read the Private series by James Patterson and his co-authors. I'll give you a couple of names. For example, we have Maxine Pietro, Mark Pearson, Mark Sullivan, Michael White, Ashwin Sangji, Reese Jones, Jesse McKenzie. So those are the different co-authors. Now, I was able to get all 14 of those books. Well, actually, it was really 16, because 12.5 and 13.5 were novellas. So you have book 12, book 12.5, book 13, book 13.5. I was only able to get up to the 15th book, which was Private Moscow. There are 2 more, which is Private Rogue and Private Shanghai. But those are not available by audio. So that was 15 plus the 2 novellas, so 17 books that I read during the month of July. I'm not going to really go into any of them, because to talk about 15 books in succession would be overwhelming. But I will say, I don't know if it's because I knew it was going to be my last book until the other 2 books come out by audio. But Private Moscow was indeed my favorite of all of the books. And I read these books with great dedication, and I remember the books and the characters and the drama. And but just excellent book. And I also want to tell you that when I finished Private Moscow, this put me at 131 books read by James Patterson. He is definitely one of my favorite authors. Now, the way the Private series works, it has two ways you can read it. The way I chose to read it was chronologically by release year. Now, when I say by release year, the first book was released in 2010, and the most recent book, as of what was available by audio, was 2020. That's how I read it, 2010, 2011, 2012, and so on. But the series, when it features Jack Morgan, who is the owner of Private US or Private LA, what you have is the first series, which is Private, Private Number One Suspect, Private LA, Private Vegas, Private Paris, and The Games or Private Rio. So if you wanted to just read about Jack Morgan, you would read those books in that order. And that is considered the main series. Then you have some of these other titles that are Private Games, Private London, Private Berlin, Private Oz, Private India, Private Sydney, Private Delhi, Private Moscow. Those are not part of the Jack Morgan stories. And by the way, Jack Morgan was one unlucky in love man. That man experienced more heartache than 10 characters in different books that I read. But anyway, I still love this guy. So, like I said, you can read it, and I will try to make a screenshot for the Private series itself, and then a separate screenshot with the other books that are not part of the main series. But that's not how I read it. And I can kind of show you. Nope, I lost it. Let's go back and get it. So you see how the Private series, there's books there, and then below that there's other books that are not part of the main series. Well, I just read it chronologically, and I was happy that I did that. Now, I'm going to jump ahead to There Angels Cry by Shannon Hollinger. Now, I read 2 books by Shannon, 2 or 3 books. I read 3 books. The Girl Who Lied, Their Angels Cry, and The Shadow Girl. Now, I have The Shadow Girl for a review, but the way that I am, I always try to read every connected book whenever that's possible. Now, our character here, her name is Maggie, and she's Chief Maggie Riley, and her history is she was a successful detective in a big city, but there was a kind of like something negative happened that impacted her career negatively. So now she has become chief of police in a very small town. And I'm just going to summarize it like that. In those 3 books, I will pop those covers up successfully in sequence. And then I read 3 books again. And this is the Stephanie King series by Rachel Abbott. That was And So It Begins, The Murder Game, and Don't Look Away. Now, I had Don't Look Away for a blog tour. I think it was just today. But the only thing that I found wrong with the series is in each case, there is a murder case that is going on. And you learn all about the victims, their backstories, the investigation, any secrets, any deviousness, and so forth and so on. And then you have Stephanie King that comes in and investigates. And in each book, I felt like Stephanie King was a supporting character, but it's the Stephanie King series, so you would think that she would be the chief protagonist. That's my only thing about that series. I don't think I'm going to continue that series. So that's 2 series I'm not going to continue. I'm not continuing the Stephanie King series, and I'm not continuing the Eve Duncan series. So then we have, we're almost done, believe it or not. Remember I said I read The Prenup by Ariane Richmond, and then I watched the movie Gaslight with Charles Boyer and Ingrid Bergman? Well, when I was downloading books off of NetGalley, I saw this one called Gaslighting Recovery for Women by Dr. Amelia Kelly. Now, this book won't be out till the 15th of August, but this is a recovery guide that has these features in it. It's a 3-part recovery program, real-life covert gaslighting cases, accessible therapy exercises, activities, and techniques, and then signs of mental manipulation for prevention and recovery. Very, very interactive book. Even though I had it as a Kindle book, within the Kindle document itself, there were links to a website for the exercises and the techniques and the references. And let me tell you, the references, this Amelia Kelly is a very successful doctor, and her research was impeccable. It was a pretty short book, only 192 pages, but I enjoyed it. Then we get to Dark Corners by Megan Golden. Okay? Now, it's the Rachel Crowell book number 2. The first book was The Night Swim, which came out in 2020. And this one, it's not quite out. It'll be out in a few days. Now, in this book, we have a man that's about to be released from prison for breaking and entering, but he's also been suspected of the murders of 6 women. Now, Madison Logan would love to keep Terrence Bailey in jail, but they don't have enough to pin those murders on him. They actually hit a wall. So when we have Rachel Crowell, who is our FBI agent, she's asked to step in and to help find someone that's missing. Who's missing? Woman that's missing. Her name is Madison. As I mentioned her name incorrectly earlier. Her name is Madison Logan. She's an influencer, social media influencer. She disappears. So now the FBI get involved, and Rachel is looking for this influencer. But remember, we have this man that is about to be released from prison, and the question is whether or not he is connected with any of this. It's really a race against time. It's a race to not just identify the murderer, but find Maggie and also find another girl named Heather. I was holding that back for a second because I didn't want to give you a spoiler on that one. Then the last book that I read actually was After That Night by Karen Slaughter. I loved this one. Will Trent number 11 comes out August 22nd. Now, there was first the Grant County series by Karen Slaughter, which I believe was 6 books. And now the Will Trent series is 11 books. Now, there is a series on TV, I don't remember what network, what streaming service, that's called Will Trent. Okay? And that has Angie, which is his former foster sister, now his girlfriend. And that's what the television series, that's where it is. I guess it depends on the duration of the television series as to whether or not what I'm about to say comes to the television screen. Because now, in this series, Will is with Sarah Linton. In fact, they're engaged. And we learn a lot about Sarah's past in this book here. Okay? Now, Sarah is a doctor, and she has the case of a young woman who was brutally attacked. Something happened to Sarah 15 years previously, and somehow everything is connected. That's about it. So, I leave you hanging with a lot, if not most, if not all of these books, because I would love to encourage you to read them yourself. So let me get to editing. I have got to bring in the book covers and any slideshows I want to stick in here or whatever. But that is my wrap up for July. What is my intent for August? As mentioned already, my intent for August is to read at least 2 books a day for 30 days to the tune of 60 books. And I'm pretty sure I will get that accomplished. And I have other goals that I'm doing too: diamond painting goals, jigsaw puzzle goals, cross stitch goals. But that is my reading wrap up for the month of July. I know this video was long, but 45 books, what else can I give you? All right. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.